Genshin Impact, the spear is still introduced. Reader Communication Group 6776281167, see Genshin Impact's small library. My name is Bai Qiyun, from Liyue, and I am a chef. I thought I would inherit my grandfather's Bai's restaurant and work as a chef at Liyue for a lifetime. Until one day, the people from the neighboring Wanmin Hall ran out to visit Tiwat, and I was kicked out by the old man. Don't bring me back until you become a qualified chef. Notice before viewing. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. This book was written in Game 2.0 version, so if you continue with the progress, it will definitely conflict with the original game content. Therefore, if you find any content in this book that has not appeared in the original work or conflicts with it, please treat it as the author's second design and do not take it seriously. Thank you for your cooperation. Chapter 1. Youth, Girls, and the Forest. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. An endless wilderness, covered with grasslands. The girls slowly woke up from the darkness of a distant era. The gentle breeze, rolling up the crumbs of grass, brushed over her and the faces of the little elves around her. A gentle touch, like a mother caressing her child's face. The grassland and tree canopy form a green ocean, and as the wind blows, the green waves rush and surge on the plain. Leaning against the mountains, Ying followed Pai Meng towards the location they had agreed upon. As is well known, language and poetry drift with the wind. The little elf next to the girl flickered, and Pai Meng closed his eyes like a scholar, telling Ying about the past of this land. Just the two people who have been dripping water for half a day are already a bit hungry. What's the smell? A burst of fragrance drifted from afar to the nose of the flying little greedy insect. Pai Meng's face changed and he rubbed his little hand against his chest. Ying, why don't we go and take a look? The blonde girl has no objection to this. Anyway, it's a trip, and people from all over the world want to see it. Two little guys secretly searched for the fragrance and stroked forward. Step by step, they crossed the grassland and unknowingly entered the forest. The branches covering the sky and earth completely block the sunlight, and only occasionally sprinkle a little sunshine between the scattered leaves. The originally sunny weather has now become particularly deep, but the broken sun that has passed through layers of levels has added some peace to this quiet forest. What a fragrant taste! Entering the forest, without taking a few steps, a stronger fragrance than outside drifted freely. How could the two people who didn't eat resist this smell? Even the promise to go and see the 7 heavenly god statue first was forgotten by the two of them at this moment. Ying's pink tongue licked the slightly dry corners of her mouth. Her intuition told her that it's not far. Sure enough, stepping through a thicket again, the source of the fragrance appeared in the eyes of the two. That was a boy dressed very strangely, with black hair and black pupils. He was dressed in clothes that were quite different from those seen far away on the road. He had a delicate appearance, and his height could not be accurately estimated because he was sitting, but at least he seemed to be taller than Ying himself. The boy was grilling something on the fire, which was the culprit that lured the two of them. While grilling, Bai Qiyun fanned the meat in front of him with his hand. With words in his mouth, he said, if there were no divine eyes, could we only achieve this level? It seems that the young man still has many dissatisfaction with this barbecue that can attract visitors from all over the world. While feeling the movement of the wind, the young man realized something was wrong. He looked up and saw 2 big living people standing in front of him. Wah! I almost scared Bai Qiyun unconscious now. Are you two walking without any sound? The young man was frightened and became a bit irritable. He didn't care whether the other person was a beautiful girl or not, and after a fierce bombardment, he fought back. The 2 current offenders are also somewhat embarrassed. Pai Meng drew a circle in the sky and then hid behind Ying, indicating that he wanted Ying to handle it. Without time to manage the somewhat unjust behavior of his companions, Ying faced the young man and didn't know how to speak up. She is accustomed to treating everything as an adventure, so when exploring the source of fragrance, she instinctively suppresses her own footsteps. Parman, not to mention that she uses flying. Sorry for startling you. Anyway, it's definitely right to apologize first. The girl lowered her head, and her slightly sweet voice drifted into the boy's ears with the wind. Suddenly, the panic caused by being scared disappeared in an instant. There's no need to be so formal. By doing so on the other side, it made him seem like some bad person. Bai Qiyun quickly waved his hand, indicating that there was nothing serious about it. As soon as the conversation stopped, the two of them became awkward again. A beautiful girl with blonde hair. Damn it, how should we communicate with girls? Bai Qiyun swallowed his saliva and found that in his past brief life, he had very little communication with girls of the same age. Looking at her sparkling and jewel-like beautiful pupils, he felt a bit at a loss. What to do, what to do? In the end, he could only hold back a greeting from his grandfather's generation, which was often used by Liyue, through his teeth. Have you eaten? Have you eaten? Okay, that's great. Undoubtedly, it is the ancient wisdom of Liyue that fully embodies my stuttering at this moment. Bai Qiyun creaked his mouth a few times in the air, like a dead fish. Watching it, Ying smiled. Puff, the girl's shoulders trembled with laughter, her golden hair tied in small braids swaying back and forth in her ears. After a while, Ying reached out her fair hand and wiped away the tears from the corner of her eyes as she smiled. Hello, my name is Ying, and you? Well, my name is Bai Qiyun and I am a trainee chef. Bai Qiyun realized his mistake earlier and grabbed his hair with his hand to ease the embarrassment. Seeing that the atmosphere between the two was very good, Pai Meng also drifted out from behind Ying. The white elf flew between the two, and the ribbon behind him flickered like wings. Hello, my name is Paimon. Oh, Win Slim. However, Pai Meng's impactful appearance did not leave a good impression on Bai Qiyun, but rather frightened him once again. Pai Meng pinched his waist in anger, his face bulging. Who are you talking about as Win Slim? But you can fly, what else can it be if it's not Win Slim? How could that be? Have you ever seen such a cute and talkative Win Slim like me? As if to prove it to Bai Qiyun, Pai Meng flew twice and then made a funny face at him. I've decided, I'll give you an unpleasant nickname, just call you, Cook. Naming expert Pai Meng patted his forehead and came up with a new nickname. It should be said that he truly deserves to be Pai Meng. Cooking. Doesn't sound like much either. Anyway, he's also a chef, so it's just right to call him that. After a brief conversation, Bai Qiyun was also willing to believe that the flying little guy in front of him was not the intellectually disabled Win Slim. After all, Slim wouldn't give anyone a nickname. As for low intelligence, isn't it low? There is still room for discussion. But by the way, what are you two here for? Upon hearing Bai Qiyun's question, both of them felt a bit embarrassed. We came along with the fragrance. Finally, Ying had to answer. However, there is also a hint of shyness in the words. Fragrance. Bai Qiyun looked at the two people across from him, and then at the barbecue still roasting on the ground. Does it seem to have a slight fragrance? Seeing Bai Qiyun stunned for a moment, Ying and Pai Meng thought that the other party thought they were ill-intentioned and quickly wanted to continue explaining. However, soon, Bai Qiyun became like when he was at a restaurant at home. Ah, you haven't eaten yet. Come on, hurry up and eat together. Bai Qiyun greeted the two of them as if they were guests and quickly sat down. Ying and Pai Meng stared at each other with big and small eyes. The original goal was actually achieved at this moment, and the two of them didn't act affectedly. They quickly found a place to sit on the ground. Bai Qiyun took out the tableware on the side, divided the meat well, and handed it to the two people. The thick grilled pork chops that were just cut from the grilled meat, from the incision, showed a sharp contrast between the pink and tender meat inside and the slightly burnt brown skin on the outside. The soft and juicy inside, the seasoning soaked outside, took a fierce bite, and the juice overflowed everywhere, merging into one. It's really delicious. Delicious to the point where little greedy ghost Pai Ming's eyes lit up. She carried the meat cutlets that were almost her face size and fed them into her fourth-dimensional stomach one by one. The cheeks are covered in oil. And on one side of the screen, it goes without saying that the swallowing speed was even faster than Paimin's, and he didn't even have the ability to speak. Is that right? I imitated the local flavor of Monde and made it. It's not very mature yet, as long as you like it. For Bai Qiyun, every affirmation from a diner is an experience on his growth path. The accumulated experience will become an important memory for his future life. It's so delicious. Is it still a trainee chef? Pai Meng, whose mouth was stuffed with meat, still insisted on chatting with Bai Qiyun. In her world, the one who gives her good food is the good person. Speaking of which, what about novice chefs? Is it difficult to become a chef and have an exam? After wolfing down her food, Ying had already solved the plate-sized barbecue steak and was elegantly wiping her mouth with a handkerchief. If she hadn't seen her eating scene just now, Bai Qiyun might have been deceived. Actually, there's no such thing. For personal safety, Bai Qiyun did not express any views on Ying's eating behavior just now. Just kidding, if someone can approach him silently, they can definitely kill him silently. Even if it looks kind, that's not a reason to provoke them. Of course, except when emotionally excited. If my grandfather doesn't approve of me, then I can only be a trainee chef. Yu reading www. Bukanshu. Net thinking of the old man who kicked him out of the house from afar, Bai Qiyun felt a headache. What does it mean to become a qualified chef? Even though he is already very qualified, occasionally using his own dishes to entertain the distinguished guests in the funeral hall does not make them unhappy. Isn't this considered qualified? For his own grandfather, he is still at a loss. Bai Qiyun changed his mind and looked at the blonde girl across from him. Don't talk about me, what are you two doing in this whispering forest? It's not just for my food, right? Actually, we need to. I'm here to find my brother. Ingbi Pai Meng was the first to state her purpose. The blonde girl looked at the sky with golden eyes, but could only see the sea of tree crowns covered by trees. Actually, I've been looking for my brother, but I don't have any clue. By the way, have you ever seen someone who looks similar to me? He's a boy. His boy. Bai Qiyun carefully recalled and found that there was no such memory, so he could only spread out his hands. Sorry, it seems like I haven't seen it before. Ying didn't feel too discouraged either, but her eyes that had just lit up slightly dimmed. No, it's okay. I never thought I could find him so easily. Looking at the girl's profile, Bai Qiyun fell into contemplation. Relatives, for me, it's like an old man. If it's missing, then we should do our best to find it. Although he thought so in his heart, Bai Qiyun did not express this encouragement. He just quietly accompanied Ying until the breeze brushed against the earth again. Chapter 2. Revealing the Essence from Cuisine. You are listening at novelfull.audio. After lunch, the three of them sat by the fire and started chatting. Speaking of which, as a cook, you're not from Monde, are you? Pai Meng turned his small eyes and stared at the clothes on Bai Qiyun's body. Hey! Aren't they from Monde? But Ying, who had not yet delved into the world, seemed to have mistaken him for a local person early on. Actually you can tell at a glance that my appearance and attire are not in the Monde style. Originally, he didn't intend to conceal anything, it's more normal to be seen by others. People like Ying, who have been chatting for a long time but haven't noticed, are rare species of Tiwat. The most obvious thing is their appearance. The facial contours of the Monde people are very different from those of our Liyue people. Of course, the most different thing is their hair color. The Monde people's hair color tends to be more bright, while the Liyue people's hair color tends to be deeper. Speaking of which, Bai Qiyun tugged at Ying's hair. Of course, this is just a general theory, with exceptions for every country and region, such as the holders of the Eye of God. The holder of the Eye of God. Ying has never seen anyone with divine eyes until now. Yes, generally speaking, holders of the Eye of God will be infused with elements, and their skin or hair color will also change. Thinking of a certain white-haired woman, Bai Qiyun's mouth twitched. Well, that's all for now. As for the differences in dressing, you have to experience them yourself. Although you can tell them at a glance, it's not very realistic to just think about them in a few sentences. Ying, who had been well educated, now had an expression of, "I understand," on her face. But God's eye, I really want to see what it looks like. The blonde girl lay on the grass, imagining the appearance of the Eye of God. Although she had never seen the Eye of God, she was certain that she did not have that kind of thing on her body. Cooking, what were you muttering to yourself while grilling meat before? Just when we first arrived. Perhaps feeling ignored, Pemon quickly came out to find a sense of presence. Bai Qiyun touched his chin and said, "I didn't expect you all heard what was said at that time. Would you like to speak a little quieter next time you talk to yourself?" "Hello." "Ahaha, don't worry, I'm not saying that eavesdropping is not good." Watching Pai Meng's slightly bulging face, Bai Qiyun felt a bit amused. This little guy looks quite cute no matter what. I was trying to stimulate the elemental power in food through experiments before. Elemental power. Stimulate the elemental power in food. Ying and Pai Meng both called out, but their focus was not on the same place. "Hey, cook, you don't have divine eyes, how could you do that?" The elf's face was filled with disbelief, as she felt the boy was deceiving her. "Well, I didn't succeed either." Watching the two guys chatting back and forth, Ying looked bewildered. "Wait. You two, wait first." The girl stood between the two and rudely interrupted their communication. "Let's not mention whether it's excited or not. Speaking of which, what is elemental force?" Bai Qiyun looked at Pai Meng and found that she had an innocent expression on her face, and even spread her hand. "Is there anyone who doesn't know about this kind of thing? Is it possible that this beautiful girl jumped out of a stone? However, roast belongs to roast, and the solution still needs to be solved." Bai Qiyun pressed his hand and gestured for Ying to sit down with him. All objects in this world are composed of elemental forces, and a relatively pure portion of them will exhibit single elemental properties, such as electrical crystals, grass, water, and other inanimate substances, or elemental organisms like slime. But most substances are mixtures, and in the vast majority of times, they cannot exhibit a single elemental property because the elemental composition is very chaotic. For example, in humans, when they fail to awaken the Eye of God, they are unable to demonstrate elemental characteristics and control elemental power. However, on the other hand, if people can find ways to directly demonstrate the ability of elemental characteristics such as slime electrical crystals, then perhaps humans can also drive elemental power without the need for the Eye of God. Speaking of which, Bai Qiyun paused and said, "Since everything contains elemental power, the ingredients themselves must also contain elemental power. Although people don't know how to prevent humans from using elemental power through the eyes of God under the influence of complex elements, humans may have taken a big step forward in cooking." Cooking. Ying was a bit confused. Why did she bring it back to cooking? Yes, if you've been paying attention, you'll find that before climbing snow-capped mountains, people often drink a soup that transmits heat properties to the human body. The essence of that dish is to transmit its own fire properties to people. That is to say, under the exploration of predecessors, people have used complex ingredients to achieve dishes with single-element properties. Saying and doing, seeing the increasingly confused eyes of the two, Bai Qiyun decided to do it himself and let them try it out. Ignite the fire and set up the pot. Thaw the cold fresh meat first, then blanch it with water. Cut carrots into pieces, tomatoes into pieces, and add a spoonful of water. Put the processed lean meat and vegetables together into the pot, add a little salt and sugar to enhance the flavor. Wait until the appropriate time to take out the pot. A pot of stewed vegetables and meat with thick sauce is done. Although he had just eaten barbecue, facing the bowl of rich and fragrant soup in front of him, Pemon couldn't help but swallow his saliva. Come on, you two, give it a try. Bai Qiyun put the stewed meat into a bowl and handed it to the two people. Ha ha yo. Pai Meng blew his breath with his mouth, trying to cool the soup on his lips, and then drank the slightly less hot soup into his mouth. In an instant, a hot breath emanated from the inside out of the body. This is. Even though I just took a sip of soup, if I finish the whole bowl, I'm afraid I won't feel cold for half a day. Looking at the surprised expressions on their faces, Bai Qiyun smiled proudly. As you can see, this is the recipe that has been improved multiple times in recent years on the continent of Tiwat. Originally, cold and fresh meat only had some ice-like characteristics, not just elemental creations, but vegetables were also clumps of grass-like properties. However, by mixing them with water-like properties, a continuous supply of fire-like food can be prepared for the body. Is that really unique? But didn't you use fire when cooking? Could it be that these dishes serve as storage? Pai Meng still doesn't quite believe in this kind of thing that shatters her values. At first, I thought the same way, but it's easy to find evidence to refute this viewpoint. What evidence? Now even Ying has been aroused with interest. In the process of cooking, not all cooking methods require the use of fire. There are many processing methods that can be done without fire, and some of them can also provide the power of fire elements. Therefore, the attributes of cooking provided are not related to the obvious characteristics of the ingredients added during the cooking process. How did that come about? Did it happen out of thin air? This kind of thing is out of nothing and sounds too scary to Paimon. Unexpectedly, Bai Qiyun shook his head and said, "Not really. Do you remember what I said at the beginning? Except for a few pure elemental crystals, the vast majority of the remaining substances in this world are composed of mixed elements. Therefore, the cold and fresh meat that reflects the characteristics of ice has the power of fire element in its body, but the external manifestation is just ice element." After this lengthy argument, Pai Meng felt a bit dizzy. But the screen on one side was lost in thought. So, does that mean you want to study the truth behind it now? Pai Meng came to his senses and attempted to summarize the nearly 2,000-word content just now. That's right, that's roughly what it means. Bai Qiyun nodded. People without divine eyes may gain something here, and I have a premonition that if we can study the principle of transforming elemental power through transparent cuisine, we may be able to understand the essence of the world. Essentially. Transparent. It seems like you're no longer cooking, you're clearly alchemy. Alchemy. Perhaps, but in exploring the power of elements, I think there must be different paths leading to the same goal. Bai Qiyun did not take Pai Meng's questions to heart. He tidied up the grass to avoid leaving garbage here. Pai Meng also flew around the young man, watching him tidy up. So what level can you reach now? What kind of level can we achieve? Bai Qiyun took out the slime condensate he had finally obtained yesterday from his backpack. It took him a long time to pull out a single one from the slime gathering place, and he used various means to collect it. He sneakily pulled out another bottle of butter, but the color was a bit off. What are you? Pemon pointed to the bottle of purple liquid and felt a bit nauseous. This is made by grinding the rice wife's specialty ghost worm into powder, adding it to butter and stirring it. Now that rice wife is blocking the country, these little things are precious. Insects. Insects. Compared to money, Pemon was even more surprised that this guy had added bugs to the cooking seasoning. Plus that sticky slime, this is not cooking, it's definitely alchemy. Ying Mei on one side also smashed her mouth. She didn't even want to eat this thing even if she was beaten to death. Humph, this is my latest confidence creation. Bai Qiyun added several seasonings and casually added some small lampgrass and fallen berries, making the pot purple and emitting blue light. Those who knew it was cooking, while those who didn't thought it was making poison. Hello, cook. Have you tried making this thing yourself? Just that smell caught Pemon and Ning off guard, and now they are standing far away from each other. No. How dare you do this without you? It's really cliché. How can cuisine be innovative without an exploratory spirit? I'm swimming in the ocean of innovation, do you understand? The food here is not ready yet, so Bai Qiyun started boasting and boasting. However, fate does not fulfill people's wishes. As the cooking was gradually completed, the ground beneath Bai Qiyun's feet suddenly trembled. What's going on here? Before the three of them could even establish their footing, one grass slime after another emerged from the ground. In just a moment, there were more than 10 of them, and judging from the momentum, it was far from enough. Ah 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 ah. In an instant, the grass-green slime ocean erupted from among the three, forcefully pushing them towards the distance. Chapter 3. Guarding the Ruins. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The green ocean swept the young man into the depths of the whispering forest. Along the way, I ran over countless small light bulbs and pigeons that couldn't escape in time. The animal meat spilled all over the ground, and no one picked it up. As the distance grew longer, the number of grass slimes advancing also became fewer and fewer. Finally, when he collided with the fifth big tree, Bai Qiyun finally stopped the car. You guys. Watching Grass Slim bouncing back and forth, an unnamed flame ignited deep within him. However, after measuring the difference in combat effectiveness, he still felt that it was better not to show off. Simply put, it's just cowardice. I made a common-sense judgment, absolutely. It's not running away. After throwing down an unknown word to someone, Bai Qiyun turned his head and headed deeper into the forest. There's nothing we can do. The outside is blocked by Grass Slim, and we won't be able to get out for a while. It's better to walk inside and see if there are any novel ingredients to use. For safety reasons, Bai Qiyun took out his only aggressive prototype so far. The new A203, don't ask why it's 203, of course all the previous ones have failed. Of course, strictly speaking, A203 is also a failed product. But its failure is very directional, so it can be used as the first semi-finished product. This is the inspiration that Bai Qiyun took from his previous stew of thick and juicy vegetables. He replaced the raw materials with more elemental power, then made them into powder to increase the contact area. Finally, he used the flower stamen powder of the flame flower to make a starter. As long as these two powders come into contact, they will release the elemental power of fire like cooking. However, due to differences in raw materials and reaction levels, this simplified version can release more fire element power than the dish itself, which is several tens of times stronger. Although it still cannot effectively deal damage to large enemies, and has the disadvantage of having little effect on enemies with fire attributes, for a person without divine eyes, this combat power is actually considered super powerful. At least dealing with a single QQ person is not a problem, and when encountering a group of QQ people, one can easily escape with a backhand advantage. He opened the insurance of A203, so that any shock would quickly react within seconds, effectively dealing with unknown risks. However, this thing is indeed far from cooking, more like the alchemy product in the mouth of Pai Meng. In fact, Bai Qiyun is well aware of this. However, this does not affect his view that these products are still part of his culinary journey. Steadily, Bai Qiyun walked forward against the tree. There may be some strange things in this forest. If you are not careful, you may get injured or even die. You're right, the mechanical wreckage in the corner. After walking a few steps, Bai Qiyun didn't find anything good, so he used this ruins as a temporary stronghold to identify the direction. I didn't confirm it carefully just now, but now when I look closer, I do have a lot of courage, right? For some reason, the head of the originally scrapped relic guard suddenly lit up, making a creaking sound all over, and climbed up from the ground. No. I don't know, I've never heard of such a thing before. Although somewhat panicked, Bai Qiyun quickly took self-rescue measures. At the first moment, he thought about where to run, because this big guy is not easy to deal with at first glance. If he can't fight. Fighting is so dangerous. It's just that there are stone walls all around, and I can't climb up in a short time. The only way to the forest is still behind the ruins guards. It's really troublesome now. Bai Qiyun sweated profusely for himself. He adjusted the A203 held in his right hand to a more easily exerting position. Then constantly recall the intelligence related to the site guards. Although he is just a cook, at least he is also a cook who grew up in Liyue port. For so many years, he has at least heard of relic guards, which are ubiquitous throughout the world. But there really isn't any intelligence about getting up from the ground to fight, and if he knew, he wouldn't have come running over casually. It's just that thinking so much now is useless, the most important thing now is fighting. Fight. Is there any combat-related intelligence available now? Please, please. Bai Qiyun was frantically squeezing memories from his mind. I remember this guy has 3 attack methods. The first one is jumping, relying on his own weight to attack others. The triggering condition for this type of attack is that the target is too far away from the relic guard, which may trigger it. Bai Qiyun leaned back. Because he knew that this attack method was actually relatively easy to avoid, and the famous adventurers in Liyue port could easily do it. For him, it is not difficult to make estimates with prior knowledge of intelligence. He is a bit confident in his skills, after all. He has never stopped exercising due to the demands of the old man over the past decade, and being a cook also requires physical strength. The second type of attack is that the relic guard will rotate their arms, constantly causing sustained damage to the surrounding objects. The triggering condition is unknown, but some people also say that it seems to be triggered at a medium distance. The disadvantage is slow action. Thinking of this, Bai Qiyun felt a bit nervous. If it were to turn around in this narrow place, it would be like there was no way to heaven or earth. The third attack method is that the ruins guard will launch missiles to attack the locked target. However, due to the possibility of outdated parts, the launched missile may be slow at the beginning and can be easily dodged by running. Bai Qiyun stared nervously at the ruins guard in front of him, and he couldn't do anything at this moment. Can we still make him charge towards the opposite side barehanded? He doesn't have a divine eye. Now we can only make judgments based on the other party's movements and decide our next actions. There is only one chance. Bai Qiyun swallowed his saliva and grabbed A203's right hand harder. Suddenly, the relic guard in the boy's sight moved. Moved, but not completely. It takes a stance in place and then lifts its head. It's a missile launch. Bai Qiyun is grateful that it is not the so-called windmill attack method. Although it may be a bit narrow here, there is still more than enough room to evade this type of attack. Of course, more importantly, the back sway you did is too long. Bai Qiyun charged straight towards the ruins guards who were still posing. Halfway through, the ruins guards finally launched those rusty missiles. As in the intelligence, slow and leisurely. But if you don't dodge, you will also be hit, and dodge will waste time. It's really a dilemma. However, that is for ordinary people. I saw Bai Qiyun lift his head and take a gentle glance, roughly locking in the direction of the opponent's attack. Then, he shook the A203 in his right hand hard and threw it with force. Pang! The strong fire element scattered in the air directly collided with the missile, and Yu reading www.yuukangshu.net detonated them as they were still floating in mid-air. Completely render the attack of the ruins guard ineffective. At this moment, Bai Qiyun also crossed over the ruins guard and rushed towards the interior of the forest. Goodbye, big guy. Just not long after he was happy, he saw that the relic guards had already made a jumping forward move. Damn it, this guy hasn't given up yet. Aren't you just being a pile of scrap metal? While constantly moving in his heart, Bai Qiyun's hand movements did not slow down at all. He instantly took out another A203 from his pocket, pull out the safety, shake, and throw. The action was completed in one go. The fiery red powder, accompanied by a strong fire element, exploded in the air and collided with the newly established ruins guard along with the bottle. And the action of guarding the ruins was naturally hindered. At this moment, Bai Qiyun had already run out of the locked area of the ruins guard. I don't know how long it took, but Bai Qiyun stopped when he saw that there was no movement behind him. This person, indeed, cannot be compared to machinery. He sat on the ground out of breath to rest. After regaining his senses, Bai Qiyun realized that he seemed to have run out of the Whispering Forest, and the city of Mond was already faintly visible in the distance. It's really strange, can this also come out? Without hesitation, where did Grass Slim go? Bai Qiyun decided to spend the night in Mond City tonight. Taking advantage of the early morning sky, on this green plain, the young man marched towards the pastoral city of wind and dandelions. Chapter 4. The famous bartender of Mao Tai Tavern. You are listening at novelfull.audio. As the main city of Wind Mond, its massive body can be seen from the other end of the plain. The grey city walls made of stone bricks, along with the moat surrounding the city of Mond, and the blooming dandelions on the land outside the city, all together constitute the pastoral city floating in the wind and poetry. Welcome to Mond. Wishing you a pleasant journey. After crossing two guards like door gods, Bai Qiyun entered the city of Mond through the main gate. That was the Shifeng Knights from the Shifeng Knights Order just now, well equipped. Bai Qiyun remembered the two Westwind Knights who had just checked his documents. Just how do you feel that those two knights just now were listless? Was it because their affairs were too busy? But obviously not many people have entered the city. It's really strange. Bai Qiyun walked along the main road into the city and continued on. For some reason, I didn't see many people along the way, even in front of the adventurer associations in every country's main city. Did something happen? Bai Qiyun is somewhat confused. As he walked, a gust of the aroma of food wafted from the front, diverting his attention. This taste. Experts, is there any particularly famous restaurant here? Bai Qiyun walked in front of the fragrance, and indeed, unlike other places, the pedestrian flow in this area was significantly higher than in other areas. And the wooden tables and chairs surrounding it indicate that this is actually a gathering place for crowds. Deer hunters. The boy raised his head and read the name on the nearby sign. As he looked at the food on the tables around him, he had a guess in his mind. This should be a restaurant. However, the current state of overcrowding is not a good time to taste the delicacies of other countries. Forget it, come back later. Anyway, my stomach is not hungry now. After giving up the idea of exploring the deer hunter, Bai Qiyun began to search for a place to stay. He is a Liyue person and doesn't have much place to live in Mond. If he doesn't look for it at dawn, he probably will have to go camping in the wilderness tonight, just like when he crossed mountains and mountains to Mond a few days ago. I'm already in the city, and it's not that I don't have money. It's a bit embarrassing to have to live in the open air. After thinking for a while, Bai Qiyun decided to go to the Adventurers Association to ask. After all, there are all sorts of commissions there. However, before taking a few steps, Bai Qiyun saw a girl in strange attire standing there. He looks 14 or 15 years old, with light golden long hair and a small pair of ponytails tied to his head. His attire is mainly purple, with his upper body wearing a black-purple small dress with bare shoulders outside. His lower body is covered by an asymmetrical black suspender on his legs, and his left leg is not even covered by black thread. The base of his smooth thigh is only adorned with a suspender. This kind of attire has greatly impacted the young Bai Qiyun. The Mon people, is it all like this? Humph, are you here? For some reason, the girl suddenly raised her left hand and placed the back of her hand above her forehead. Let me, as the ruler of the pitch-black ashes, sweep away all darkness for the people of this city. Miss, aren't you from a dark background? The purple crow next to the girl spoke in a thick middle-aged man's voice, offering advice that seemed likely to be beaten. But the girl doesn't seem to care. It's okay, it's also my duty to sweep away obstacles for ordinary people. Besides, don't confuse me with those dirty dark relatives. Bai Qiyun was watching from a distance. The communication between one person and one bird feels extremely absurd. Forget it, it doesn't seem like a normal person at first glance. The Adventure Association can go later. The young man looked around and found several open shops not far away, one of which seemed to still provide food. Just this name, Cat Tail Tavern. Is a tavern or tavern similar to Liyue's tavern? Then there should also be food provided. Anyway, being idle is also being idle. It's better to go in and take a look, and also ask if there is any place to rent. With this in mind, Bai Qiyun no longer hesitated, ignoring each person and bird in front of the Adventure Association, and turned around to open the door and enter the Cat Tail Tavern. Jia. The wooden door of the tavern made a unique sound of wood, and Bai Qiyun's gaze scanned the space behind the door. It's quite different from the imagined restaurant. There are no tables and chairs that open and close wide, but some small and exquisite sets of seats, as if it's not a place to eat. And now, the guests in the surrounding seats are all surrounded by alcohol, which looks like a pure place for drinking. That's not suitable for him here. Minors are prohibited from drinking alcohol, and drunk driving is strictly prohibited. After confirming that this was not a suitable restaurant, Bai Qiyun smacked his lips and planned to leave. However, when his gaze swept over the bartender behind the counter, it startled him. Immortal. Immortal. Behind the counter stood a petite girl, but unlike most people, she had 2 animal ears on her head, more accurately, cat ears. Behind her petite and delicate body was a model tail, with 2 cat ears curled up next to her pink hair. Her round head was also adorned with a hat, making her appear slightly larger. However, this sense of disharmony highlighted the girl's cuteness. Wearing a pink coat on the upper body and blue shorts on the lower body, completely exposed from below the thighs without any hesitation. The whole person is like a cat. Diana wrinkled her nose when she heard the words of the customer who didn't do anything as soon as she entered. What immortal, this customer, may I ask what you want? Huh, coming to the tavern to drink at this age, I guess he's also a little drunkard. Humph, those who drink are not good people anyway. Bai Qiyun was just startled by Diana's appearance. In Liyue, those with such obvious mixed-race characteristics are almost all immortals. Not to mention that he had seen Miss Ganyu with the pseudonym Wang Xiaomei in the old man's restaurant. Although she disguised herself well when she came, after she placed the order, Bai Qiyun looked at the recipe and knew she was definitely the one. After all, no normal person would order a dish like qingxin mixed with mint, and only the Moon Sea Pavilion secretary, Banxian Ganyu, who used to prefer cold salad qingxin at Bai's restaurant, would order it. Perhaps she was on vacation that day and didn't want to disturb others, so she disguised herself and came. However, this disguise was not very useful in Bai Qiyun's eyes. Returning to the topic of the tavern, Bai Qiyun looked closely after being panicked and did not feel the faint immortal power, which indicates that the little girl in front of him is not a fairy. That's right, the immortals are all living in Liyue. Where did the immortals come from in Mond? Even if there are mixed-race humans and beasts, they should not be called immortals. I'm sorry, I made a mistake just now. Since you called someone wrong, it's your own fault. Bai Qiyun nodded as an apology. Oh, it's nothing. Anyway, Diana herself has been pointed at and criticized many times due to her special appearance, and things like this are just mistaken, so that's not a big deal. However, it seems that you are not yet an adult. You are not allowed to come to a tavern to drink under your age, even in the developed wine industry of Mond. Diana straightened her chest and raised her tail, scolding the unruly students like a proud cat teacher. The nearby drinkers also burst into laughter. See, our bartender Miss Diana has started educating new people again. How many times has this been this year? Haha. Bai Qiyun was not affected by the chaotic sounds around him, but instead extracted a lot of useful information from it. Bartender Diana. The boy's gaze scanned the cat in front of him, then quickly changed to a smiling face. Ah. Actually, I'm not here to drink, I'm here to inquire about the news. He touched the back of his head to conceal his embarrassment. Oh. Don't drink at the tavern. Upon hearing Bai Qiyun's words, Diana raised her eyebrows. Although her tone was full of doubts, her attitude was much better than before. But that has nothing to do with me. As long as you don't order alcohol at the tavern, I don't have to violate the underage drinking regulations. Her expression was like saying, no need to mix drinks, that's really great. Clearly, even Bai Qiyun, who was not familiar with her, could easily tell. What else is it that minors are prohibited from drinking alcohol? It's even more inappropriate for you, little girl, to be a bartender. Bai Qiyun tilted the corner of his mouth, but he didn't say anything. After all, there may be some hidden information in the unfamiliar place of life. He quickly adjusted his condition and coughed twice. Actually, I was wondering if there are any places in Mon City that can be used for short-term living. Chapter 5. Dragon Disaster. You are listening at novelfull.audio. When you go out, walk straight along the main road on the left and you can see several houses leaning against the garden. One of them has an incomprehensible magic circle on top of it. The houses in that row are all rented out by Gerda, but due to the recent dragon disaster, not many people are willing to live in the city, and the prices are also expensive. Dragon disaster. What is that? Bai Qiyun silently noted several key points that appeared in Diana's words. Speaking of which, if you're looking for a house to live in, why don't you go ask the Adventurers Association? The cat-tail bartender swung his tail around the back of the bar. Ah, you're talking about the Adventurers Association. I just passed by, but there's a strange person there and I didn't dare to lean over. Strange person. Diana had a question mark on her face. If there were any strange people in Mon City, didn't the Westwind Knight see them? The ruler of the pitch-black ashes. She calls herself so. A girl with a crow flashed past Diana's eyes. Oh, it's Fisher, it's okay then. So, is that person very famous? Bai Qiyun admired Mon's somewhat eerie folk customs. Saying bad things about her country to outsiders made Diana feel a bit embarrassed. She raised her hand and grabbed her own ear. Well. She doesn't have an unknown problem, she's really that kind of rare. The cat-ear girl with insufficient vocabulary storage racked her brains and couldn't come up with a better language to describe Fisher. The expression on the originally cute face has now twisted together. Can be considered a strange person, but her personality is quite good, except for her incomprehensible way of speaking. Diana could only describe Fisher in such ambiguous words after holding it back for half a day, and finally added, maybe. Who made her and Fisher not so familiar with each other? However, from Miss Catherine's understanding, although Fisher's behavior is a bit strange, he is generally quite enthusiastic when seeking help from others. Oh. I don't know if Bai Qiyun understood or not, but he nodded vaguely. But one thing he understood was that the girl with strange behavior was called Fisher. Under the gaze of Diana, who had a disheveled cat face, Bai Qiyun thanked her and walked out of the cat-tail tavern, then towards the house that the cat lady had spoken of. After walking along the main road on the left after entering the city for about 20 minutes, a house with a blue magic circle appeared in front of the young man. The blue magic circle. This should be it. After determining the location, Bai Qiyun patrolled the surrounding crowd back and forth to see who looked like the Gerda, in the words of that cat. Diana told him that Gerda was an elderly man with grey hair. However, there were not many elderly people around here, and there were quite a few cats running back and forth. Well, do you know where Mr. Gerda is? After searching for a long time without any results, Bai Qiyun could only ask the passerby on the street who was holding a newspaper. Coincidentally, this was also an old man. The old man raised his head, glanced at him, and then said indifferently, "What do you need to do with Gerda?" Upon hearing this, Bai Qiyun realized that there was a play going on. This person must have known Gerda, otherwise how could they have said such things? I heard from a friend that these houses are all rented out under Gerda's name. I want to rent one for a short period of time. When the old man heard this, his eyelids trembled and he carefully looked at the young man. "Look at your outfit, you're not a local, are you?" "Yes, I come from Liyue." "There's nothing to hide, it's all written on the documents, and Liyue's clothes are also very distinctive and easy to recognize." Bai Qiyun nodded at the old man. "Since that's the case, then you can come with me." The old man didn't go looking for anyone with Bai Qiyun, but instead came to the front of those few houses. "I am Gerda you are looking for." "Hey. Oh, so you're actually Boss Gerda." Bai Qiyun immediately reacted and quickly approached to greet him. Gerda waved his hand, indicating that he didn't need to do so. He pointed to the magic circle on the door. "Can you help remove that thing?" The blue magic circle hung quietly on the door, making it difficult to tell the depth. This thing has been bothering Gerda for a long time, and because of it, houses that were once difficult to rent have become even more difficult to rent. If the young person in front of him can help him solve this problem, then he doesn't mind giving him more discounts. However, he may have overestimated Bai Qiyun as a cook. Bai Qiyun pretended to sway in front of the door a few times, but in the end, he could only give up. "Old man, I can't do anything about this. You should hire someone else." Anyway, Bai Qiyun doesn't miss this favor either. As long as he can find a house to live in smoothly, he can spend some money. Upon hearing this reply, Gerda felt a bit disappointed, but soon he became happy. At the very least, these idle houses can finally be rented out. "You can choose one, young man. I will rent it to you at 80% of the market price." "Who caused the market to be sluggish during the dragon disaster, so we can only lower prices?" "Really? Then I'll choose this one." Bai Qiyun pointed to a room next to the strange house. That room is very spacious for him, and it is also adjacent to the garden, making it quite convenient for him to do anything. Gerda looked in the direction and nodded. "Okay, I'll go get the files and keys now." "Wait a moment." After speaking, Gerda walked slowly towards his residence. Bai Qiyun stood in front of the door, waiting for the landlord to come back. However, after waiting for a long time, Mr. Gerda did not come back, but the wind was getting stronger and stronger. Strange, although Mond is a land of wind, was the wind so strong before? Bai Qiyun reached out and felt the breath slipping through his fingers. Without a doubt, it was the wind. And it has a certain amount of wind element power. Although he does not have divine eyes, he is naturally able to see traces of element flow, which is why he is able to study the driving methods of elements in reverse through cooking. So, in his eyes, the current scene will never go wrong. Is this the wind? Bai Qiyun tried to hold the wind in his hand, but without the divine eye, he couldn't do it at all. On the contrary, the rumors around me are getting stronger and stronger. He felt like he was in the eyes of a storm now, and wherever he looked, there was a strong force of wind elements. Indeed, if someone were to look out of the city of Mond from afar at this moment, they would find that the entire city of Mond was already shrouded in a storm. Hey, this is not a prank level thing anymore. The wind element force, which was already very obvious just now, is still increasing. Not only him, but also the people around him noticed something and began to run around. Most of them hid in their rooms, while only a few Westwind Knights were still wandering and patrolling outside. At this moment, they seemed to be on guard. The sky, which had just been adorned with a hint of slanting sun, has now turned into a grey and gloomy one. The gloomy sky is howling with strong winds, and the pressure on people to read books is overwhelming. Ow! Suddenly, a green flying dragon swept over the city, creating layers of storms in the already unstable air. What is that? Even though it was so far away, Bai Qiyun could still clearly feel the terrifying elemental power contained in that dragon-shaped creature. That's not something that can be compared to slime, it's simply like a fairy, no, maybe even above that. Is it a dragon disaster? A suspicion was attached to Bai Qiyun's heart. But now the strong wind is still there, and he has no place to live. He can only rely on the corner of the wall to avoid the storm caused by the dragon. The new work A203 that he was proud of in his hand, at the moment he saw that dragon, he knew that something half-hearted could not have any effect on it. He is no different from those ordinary people now, and can only hide on one side, praying for the disaster to pass quickly. However, in his anxiety, Bai Qiyun also looked as far as possible towards the center of the storm in the city. He had a premonition that the dragon was nearby. Suddenly, an even stronger storm swept through the city center again, causing damage even to the area located at the corner of Mon City. The roofs of several houses were lifted off and smashed onto the unguarded city walls, then fell to the ground and fell to pieces. This scene made Bai Qiyun's mouth dry and his tongue dry. Don't hit me, don't hit me. Bai Qiyun squinted his eyes and looked left and right at the base of the wall. Just as his gaze swept through the city center, a blonde girl flying in the wind snatched away his attention. Is that Ing? Chapter 6. Escape. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Is that Ing? The blonde girl, under the gaze of Bai Qiyun, rode the strong wind and flew into the sky, entering the depths of the clouds. Although it was a bit far away, in the eyes of Bai Qiyun, who could see the traces of elements, he could still vaguely capture Ying's figure. But it was precisely this that surprised him. When they parted ways before, Ying did not have such a strong wind element power on her body. This feeling, it feels like someone who has awakened the eye of the wind element god. Can that group of grass slime still have the effect of awakening the eye of God? While Bai Qiyun was daydreaming, a fierce chase had already begun in the depths of the clouds in the sky. Ying launched a continuous attack on the green dragon with the help of wind elemental power from unknown sources. The wind elemental power was condensed into elemental blocks by her, and then continuously shot towards the monster ahead from her chest. And that dragon, due to its large size, could only be beaten unilaterally as it could not widen the speed gap. The surging force of the wind element pierced through the sky, hitting the dragon's back directly and causing continuous damage. The battle of one person, one dragon swept through the entire sky of Mon City, and the occasional roar, even at an unknown distance, still shook the eardrums of the people. As Bai Qiyun watched, Long Enren suddenly accelerated again, making it difficult for him to keep up with the speed of both sides. My head is also slightly sore when I look up. After realizing that he couldn't help much, Bai Qiyun also gave up this meaningless behavior and began to observe the environment around him. After all, the scene of the roof falling and shattering just now still left him with lingering fear. The garden behind the house that he had just looked at was now completely unrecognizable. The originally beautiful flowers were now shattered and scattered, and the lush green grass was now heavily covered by the soil blown out by the strong wind. The patrolling Westwind Knights on the street have also become fewer than before, possibly seeking refuge. After all, in the face of that unparalleled power, having one more knight and one less knight doesn't seem to have much effect. Suddenly, a figure flashed across the street corner. Although the figure disappeared quickly, in such a situation where there was no one on the street, it appeared particularly eye-catching. Moreover, that person is not an ordinary person, as they are entangled with much more thunder elemental power than ordinary people. However, it is different from the little girl named Fisher before, not as rich as Fisher, and there are also differences in the way energy is arranged. That location. Bai Qiyun watched as the strange person disappeared and fell into deep thought. If he remembers correctly, Uncle Gerda also walked in that direction before. Is there anything there? This is not very difficult to handle, just ask Uncle Gerda later. The top priority now is still. Bai Qiyun looked up at the almost invisible screen, somewhat worried. Outside the city, Fisher, who had just been commissioned by the Adventurers Association, looked at the stormwind wall surrounding Mon City on the plain with a solemn expression. The crow Oz flapped its wings beside her and followed her as they looked towards the city of Mon. Miss, this is probably. The thick voice of the middle-aged man came from Oz's mouth, and the girl beside him had already taken it for granted. Fisher gazed at the increasingly strong wind elemental force above the city of Mond. Well, it's a dragon disaster. This terrifying wind element power cannot be mobilized by anyone in the city of Mond. Even the young acting team leader, who is renowned on the continent of Tiwat, could never have achieved this. Of course, this does not mean that the acting team leader is weak, it's just that the strength in battle does not all depend on how much elemental power can be mobilized, there are many other factors. But at least it can be certain that the only dragon that can mobilize such a massive wind elemental force to besiege Mon now is the one that has recently gone crazy. The culprit of the Mondragon disaster. The Wind Demon Dragon. However, after watching for a while, Fisher did not take any action, but instead continued to move towards his original destination in the distance. The successor of the Eye of the Storm, the Dragon of the Wind's dominance, even as the commander of the Dark Ashes, I have no way to deal with it now. She murmured to herself as if explaining something to Oz. Fisher is not worried about the safety of her parents, as their family has already taken measures to deal with the dragon disaster. As long as there is a dragon disaster outside, they can directly drill into the cellar, which is safe and convenient. But even so, facing the dragon disaster, she still felt resentful. Fisher's hands clenched tightly, his nails ingrained in the flesh without realizing it. If she could have stronger power, then she wouldn't have to retreat like this today. At the end of the day, it's still not enough strength. However, she believed that as the guilty princess of the Yue Pure Land, she must still have a powerful force that had not been discovered. Next time, seeing the Wind Demon Dragon again, she must let the other party know that Mon City is not a place you can come to if you want. With hope and longing, the girl and the Night Crow disappeared together on the plain. At this moment, the battle over Mon City is nearing its end. The girl who could fly all the time has caused great trouble to the Wind Demon Dragon, and behind her is a human like a maggot with a tarsal bone, like a cowhide ointment that cannot be thrown away no matter how hard it is. Originally, it just wanted to explore the form today, but I didn't expect there to be such a guy waiting for it. Is it difficult? Is this also the conspiracy of that guy? Without giving the Wind Demon Dragon too much thinking time, Ying's attack became increasingly fierce, and the wind element's power seemed to be inexhaustible, continuously bombarding the Wind Demon Dragon's body. Finally, the Wind Demon Dragon felt that it couldn't continue like this anymore, turned around, and accelerated its escape. The storm that was constantly gathering around gradually subsided as it receded. Ying looked at the Wind Demon Dragon that suddenly ran away, feeling a bit bewildered. She also didn't know why the other party suddenly ran away. Before that, she didn't even know why she had to fight against the other party. She was swept up by the strong wind, floating in the sky with her first self-controlled wings of the wind, and then a strange voice guided her, helping her pursue the Wind Demon Dragon. She had no idea who that person was. Ying. Amber, who was waiting for Ying to return on the ground, was already so anxious that she jumped. Others didn't know that she didn't know, but she was a newcomer who was using wind wings for the first time. What should she do if something happened? At this moment, seeing Ying return unscathed, Amber's big stone in his heart was also lowered. Ying. Before Anbai could comfort Ying, another shout came from the side for this blonde foreign traveler. Bai Qiyun just saw Ying slowly descending from the sky and hurried over. His highly regional clothing immediately made Amber recognize his identity. Are you from Liyue? It wasn't until Amber spoke and Yu read the book www.yuyukeangshu.net that Bai Qiyun realized there was a young girl beside him. And this appearance, no matter how you look, is not an ordinary Mon person, but rather a bit like a Liyue person. Ah, hello, my name is Bai Qiyun and I come from Liyue. I just arrived in Mon today, please give me more guidance. Faced with the girl's question, Bai Qiyun chose to answer it confidently. It's just how funny this scene looks. The two people who came to pick up the person left them aside, but they started chatting. The first thing Ying did when her feet were on the ground was to retract the wings of the wind, as such large wings were a bit of a hindrance. Hello, guest from Liyue. I'm Detective Knight Amber. Welcome to Mond. Since the guests have all reported their homes, Amber, who is equivalent to the host, also needs to introduce himself. Ying, are you okay? At this moment, Pai Meng drifted over and looked around the screen. Parman, the best companion. The blonde girl stretched her waist and felt her own condition. Well, it seems like there's no problem. Ying's slightly sweet voice reached the ears of two people who were still introducing themselves, instantly waking them up. Bai Qiyun quickly followed Anbai and asking for warmth, making Ying feel like something was really wrong. Just as she was about to explain, a slightly frivolous voice came from the side of the square. Looking around, a slightly coquettish, dark-looking man walked towards the three of them in inexplicable rhythmic footsteps, applauding and walking towards them. Surprisingly, there is the power to fight against dragons. Are you our guest or a new storm? Chapter 7. Mond and the Winter Solstice. You are listening at novelfull.audio. A man with dark blue hair and an eye mask walked over from the edge of the square. His words may not have much direction, but they always make people feel like they have hidden meanings. Captain Kaya. Amber was very excited when he saw the newcomer. Judging from his title, this man should also be a member of the Shifeng Knights, and his status was not low. Kaya waved her hand to Amber, indicating that she didn't need to do so. Amber realized that he didn't know anyone present yet, so he actively introduced them. This is the cavalry captain of our Westwind Knights, Kaya. The bunny girl turned to look at Ying and Bai Qiyun, and then introduced them to Kaya. These two are travelers Ying and Liyue's traveler Bai Qiyun from afar. Pai Meng, who was left behind by Amber, quickly leaned in and said, and me, I'm Pai Meng. Yes, and there's also Xiao Pai Meng, a companion who travels with this distant traveler. Ying nodded at Kaya and said, hello, my name is Ying. A traveler from afar. Obviously, Kaya was not very satisfied with this vague and uncertain intelligence, but he just smiled and did not show it. After responding, he glanced at Bai Qiyun standing on the side again. So this must be a traveler from Liyue. Although I'm sorry for encountering the dragon disaster, I still hope you can have a happy time in Mond. This seemingly friendly Captain Kaya made Bai Qiyun feel like he was facing a smiling tiger. Ah, I really liked the atmosphere of Mond. After flattering each other with Kaya for a few words, Bai Qiyun saw Gerda walking out of the place where he had disappeared before. Sorry everyone, I have something else to do. Let's talk about it next time. The boy quickly chased towards the landlord. You're really an impatient person. Seeing that someone who was in the way had already disappeared, Kaya invited the main person. Miss Traveler, can you come with us to the headquarters of the Knights Order? Ying suddenly became somewhat stiff. The Knights, that's the law enforcers, shouldn't it be something they did? Kaya saw Ying's appearance and quickly explained it. No, don't think too much. Our acting team leader wants to see you. Acting team leader. Ing heard from Amber on her way to Mon City before. Due to the original commander leading most of the main force of the Westwind Knights on an expedition, the remaining deputy commander became the acting commander during this period. I heard she is an independent and powerful woman. Ing and Pai Meng exchanged a glance before making a decision. Okay. After all, finding a brother in this world still requires the help of various forces. Otherwise, relying solely on oneself would require finding when to go. Oh, by the way, Amber, why don't you come along too? Captain Kaya, don't say those words that sound like rounding up. Even rabbits can get angry. Sounds like it. Isn't it true? Hello. The group set off from the square in a grand manner and headed towards the headquarters of the Knights. On the other hand, Bai Qiyun, who was chasing Uncle Gerda, finally completed the procedures. Starting from today, he no longer needs to sleep on the grass. This Mond is not like Liyue either. There are many inns in Liyue's wilderness, and there are only bare grass and hill people in Mond's wilderness. A few days ago, I couldn't even find a place to sleep. Well, uncle, I saw you walking that way before. Do you live there? After collecting the paper contract, Bai Qiyun pretended to ask this question unintentionally. Gerda, with graying hair, looked in the direction indicated by his hand. Ah, when you say that, it can be considered living there. Also counted. Gerda bent over and squinted his eyes, laughing twice in a somewhat hoarse voice. Actually, both the properties there and here are mine. All. All of them. Hello, that building looks very expensive, it's really fake. Bai Qiyun was startled by the aura of the wealthy. Although he had never seen a wealthy person before, it was still the first time he had seen someone as integrated into the crowd. Gerda turned around with some pride. He liked people who had never seen the market before. Actually, if you came to Mon City before and wanted to stay for a short period of time, you would definitely choose my home's Gerda Hotel. Gerda pointed to the luxurious and large building with a two-story protruding balcony for people to rest on. But his tone changed and he felt a bit embarrassed. Just recently, the foolish people from the Winter Country mission have taken over the hotel, and you can't stay now even if you want to. To the Winter Country. After obtaining the information he wanted, Bai Qiyun continued speaking according to Uncle Gerda's words. Isn't that a good thing? If you could package the entire hotel, you could definitely make a lot of money. Not to mention such a large hotel, even if their restaurant is booked for a whole day, the other party's expenses are definitely not small. Do you make money? You make a lot of money, but... Thinking of the recent rumors and gossip in the city, Gerda sighed. Just. The old man felt that talking to Bai Qiyun didn't seem like much. After all, this city is almost well known now. He twisted his slightly stiff neck and looked around, only to find that there were no foolish people behind him. He deliberately lowered his voice. In fact, there are reports that the embassy in Winter Country has been having a very unpleasant argument with Armand's Westwind Knights recently. They almost got into a big fight. The previous one named Doctor had already caused a stir in the city when he arrived, but now there's another one named Madam. Sigh, it's a tumultuous time. Bai Qiyun is a bit confused. Although different countries have different ways of naming, it is the first time he has heard such names. Seeing Bai Qiyun was a bit stunned, Gerda was also stunned, but when he thought about it, he knew what Bai Qiyun was thinking. Don't worry too much, things like doctoral and lady are more like nicknames. For them, it seems like they are some kind of executive title. Executive. I heard another word that I had never heard before. Although his family has been living in Liyue port for generations and opening a restaurant, which can be considered as having some connections, due to the presence of the Rock Prince, the arrogant and domineering guys in Jidong country have much less movement in Liyue port than Mond. Naturally, he did not have the intelligence of Mond to deal with fools. Of course, that was before, and now that the other party has aroused his curiosity, he will naturally pay more attention in his future life. It's really not possible. You can also ask a wealthy woman who often comes to eat. That's quite frustrating. Bai Qiyun gave a haha, showing that he didn't want to further investigate. And Gerda didn't want to continue. After all, walls have ears, and fools are his guests. If anyone heard the message and went back, it would be quite awkward to meet in person. After bidding farewell to the landlord, Bai Qiyun opened the room with the key and carried out a simple cleaning. However, it can be seen that this room is being taken care of. Otherwise, according to the landlord's previous statement that no one has lived in it for a long time, the dust on Yu reading www.yuyukeangshu.net must have accumulated a thick layer. But now, it's just 2 or 3 days without taking care of it. Perhaps Mr. Gerda hired someone to clean the room on time. However, the person cleaning the room may be a bit busy, leaving behind unfinished garbage in such a prominent position on the bedsheet. Bai Qiyun approached the bedside and picked up the eye-catching object with his hand, carefully examining it. Is this a rose? The red petals were rubbed back and forth in the boy's hand, and the juice had not yet dried over time, which is also a proof that someone had come a few days ago. From the traces of no one living in the room, it is likely that the flower of this rose was left behind by the careless cleaning staff. But it's not a big deal, it's just a flower. After a few glances, Bai Qiyun threw it into the trash can and didn't think much anymore. The sky has gradually turned yellow. Unconsciously, it was already evening. Only at this moment did Bai Qiyun realize that all that happened in a pile in an afternoon. First, he met Ying and Pai Meng in the forest, and later he was chased by the ruins guards. Then, he went to the east of Mon City to ask questions and encountered the dragon disaster. These things are really squeezing his head. Just an afternoon alone would be more thrilling than his life over the past decade. Prince Yen is here, please don't let me encounter these things again in the future. I'm just an ordinary person. After bowing a few times to the radish carved in the shape of a rock dragon, which had been made for practicing swordsmanship before, Bai Qiyun walked out of the room. Next. Let's go to the deer hunter. Chapter 8. Conditions for obtaining wings of the wind. You are listening at novelfull.audio. When it comes to Mon's cuisine, many people think of grilled meat with Mon's unique characteristics. The rough techniques and selection of ingredients may seem grand, but upon closer inspection, they are quite particular. However, if you really want the people of Tiwat continent to choose the most famous dish from Mon, without a doubt, it is sweet flour brewed chicken. Bai Qiyun stared at the crispy roasted whole chicken in front of him, smelling the rich aroma and faint sweetness emanating from it. Undoubtedly, the completion of this dish is quite high. If Bai Qiyun were to do it himself, it would basically be the same without using elemental power. Legend has it that this dish was born before the wind god opened up the city of Mon amidst the wind and snow. People who suffer from wind and snow are constantly craving more calories. The appearance of sweet flowers brought them hope. At that time, due to insufficient living space for people themselves, those large poultry naturally had no space for animal husbandry. After continuous selection, people finally chose the chicken as the main poultry for a period of time. In this situation, sweet flour brewed chicken, a dish based on fire and snow, naturally emerged. People always slaughter poultry, take some sweet flowers with the help of sweetness, and then bake them over fire on some memorable days to complete the process. Of course, the sweet flour brewed chicken we see today has undergone countless generations of improved versions. Bai Qiyun held a knife and fork that he was not used to, and made a cut on the crispy skin. Thorned. The sound was not like cutting open meat, but rather as crisp as chopping bamboo slices. Pick up a piece of flesh and skin with a fork, then dip it in the dipping sauce given by Miss Sarah, a deer hunter, and swallow it in one gulp. The crispy roasted chicken skin, mixed with the aroma of oil and the taste of dipping sauce, erupted in the mouth. The juicy chicken served as the vanguard of this war, engaging in a fierce battle with the tongue. But under the strangulation of the army of teeth, they can only obediently turn into someone's food in the stomach. Who? It really lives up to its reputation. Bai Qiyun looked at the dish in front of him with admiration on his face. Sure enough, when it comes to Mond, it must be sweet flour braised chicken. Although this chicken is sweet and somewhat not to his taste, there is no doubt that it is an excellent dish. What does it live up to? The little elf drifted over from afar, followed by two beautiful girls. It's you guys. Interrupted by sudden words, Bai Qiyun looked towards the direction of the sound. Pai Meng floated in front of him, with Ying and Amber hanging not far behind. That one, the cook, has good news. Pai Meng rubbed his little hands with some excitement. Bai Qiyun saw that several people had already leaned over, so he put down his knife and fork in his hand. Oh! What good news! Let's hear it. Hee, that's our Ying, who has been honored as the honorary knight of the Shifeng Knights. Pai Meng grabbed Ying's arm with his hand and then listened to her chest. That posture, I don't know, I thought she was the one who was awarded the title of honorary knight. Actually, it's not something particularly worth writing about. Ying waved her hand and then found a seat next to Bai Qiyun to sit down. The boy leaned on his chin with his hands. Hey honorary knight, that's really good. Isn't that a good thing? Yes, the leader of the Qin group said it was to commend Ying for defending Mond from the Wind Demon Dragon's hand. It is obvious that Amber must have been present at the time of the coronation, otherwise she wouldn't have been so excited. But speaking of which, does this honor knight have any documents or anything? Looking at the two people who were no different from before leaving, Bai Qiyun began to doubt the weight of this title. Although he didn't think that dragon would completely destroy Mond, at least it was also a dragon. If we just fooled through like this, it wouldn't be very appropriate. Documents. The first person to feel puzzled was Pai Meng, who didn't remember what the piano captain had given her. At this point, Amber still needs to explain. The girl patted her chest and the two little white rabbits swayed wildly. In fact, the title of honorary knight is recorded on the list of the Shifeng Knights. Generally, the person who obtains this title will print a portrait and pass it on to various captain-level figures. When entering and exiting the border and seeking help from the knights, certain conveniences will be given. Why does it sound like a businessman? Let's not worry about that. In fact, there are many benefits to honor knights, but that's all I know, haha. Bai Qiyun withdrew his gaze from Anbai and then turned to Ying, who was sitting quietly at the dining table. Despite experiencing so much before, now it looks quiet like a girl next door. It's really amazing. Speaking of which, I have something to ask you. Me. Just now, Ying, who was still calm, suddenly felt a little flustered. Yes, that's how the wings of the wind that you flew up before came about. For some reason, Bai Qiyun felt that Ying's gaze at him was a bit strange. What? What's going on? Ying stared at the boy for a while before suddenly sighing. I thought you were asking me how my wind element power came about. You said that. Everyone has their own secrets, just don't want to say it or not. Although he is also quite curious about that. Ying pointed at Amber on one side with her fair finger and said, my wings of the wind were sent by Amber. Amber. Bai Qiyun turned his head to look at the proud rabbit girl. Humph, don't look at me like this, I'm at least a reconnaissance knight, the flying champion of Mon City. Speaking of her strengths, Amber appeared incredibly confident and couldn't even tell the way she had been running around in front of Kaya earlier. Upon hearing this, Bai Qiyun raised his eyebrows. Don't say, if he wants to get the wind wing, getting it from Amber is really the quickest way. Just will they give it? Cough, Bai Qiyun pretended to cough twice. That, Miss Amber. Hey. Just call me Amber, miss. I won't need it anymore. After all, Bai Qiyun has never asked a stranger in his 800 lifetimes, so he still feels a bit uncomfortable. Facing the somewhat shy girl, he swallowed his saliva. So, how exactly should I collect the wind wing? I think Mon's citizens each have one, and Ningxi also. He lengthened his voice and intentionally or unintentionally shifted the topic to Amber. Amber scratched his hair and said, actually, the legitimate way to claim wind wings requires reporting to the knights. However, since Ing can drive the power of wind elements, and I am responsible for this, Yu can give wind wings directly to her by reading www.yuyukeangshu.net. For most people. Although she didn't say it explicitly, the meaning in her words was already very clear. Without the eye of God, those who cannot drive elemental power must obtain the wings of wind from her through formal channels. Of course, members of the Shifeng Knights are also exempt from testing, as they have already been tested when they joined the team. Upon hearing this answer, Bai Qiyun couldn't help but feel a bit disappointed, but soon he picked himself up again. Isn't there good news? She said it can be obtained through legitimate channels. What is the specific process? After learning that he had no hope of going through the back door like Ing, Bai Qiyun quickly adjusted his mentality and quickly asked the informant. The specific process is that you submit a written document, then take a written test first, and after passing the written test, conduct an actual operational assessment. Do you still have a written test? Bai Qiyun looked at Ing, who put on an awkward and polite smile. Hello, this guy has never taken a written test, has he? What is the significance of this written test? It's not just for the number of card holders, is it? No, in the words of Captain Qin, it means in order to ensure the safety of citizens' flights and improve their travel efficiency, higher standards and strict requirements should be placed on the issuance of travel methods and certificates. Amber imitated Qin's tone and finished this long sentence. It was really hard enough for her. Isn't this still the number of card holders? They all said no. Amber took out a piece of paper from his pocket and handed it to Bai Qiyun. You fill in this, and I will arrange your written test afterwards. Don't try to escape. Chapter 9. The First Meeting with the Rose. You are listening at novelfull.audio. After following Ing and the others to eat the honey sauce carrot fried meat, invited by Amber, Bai Qiyun began preparing for the written test with the flight rules that Amber had taken out from somewhere. And Ing and Pai Meng went to the most famous bar in Mon City at Amber's invitation. Angel's Gift. However, based on Ying's appearance, it is estimated that the bartender will not violate the underage drinking regulations by mixing her a glass of wine. Article 23. Without permission, it is not allowed to glide the wings of the wind over Mon City. Violators shall be fined 5,000 mora, and those who cause serious consequences shall have their flight license revoked and detained. Article 24. Bai Qiyun was reciting the content recorded in the small notebook on the road. During this period, due to being too serious, he stepped on the tails of 2 cats, ran through bushes 3 times, bumped into a tree once, and even dropped a few bird eggs. After picking a few mufong mushrooms that were growing in front of him, Bai Qiyun finally returned to his temporary residence. Hey, what kind of tropical jungle is this? Why is there everything in the city? Am I coming to Mond or Sumeru? I went out for a meal this time, and when I returned, I had an extra pile of vegetables in my hand. Those who didn't know thought he had just gone out to buy groceries. Bai Qiyun took out the key and was about to insert it into the door lock, but he accidentally bumped into the door, which was suddenly pushed open. Ah! He immediately became careful. Before leaving just now, he remembered locking the door. Is this a thief now? Bai Qiyun slowed down his steps, wanting to see who was so bold. When he opened the bedroom door, he found that it was actually a girl cleaning the room. Hey! The girl who was sweeping the floor with a broom in her hand was startled when she saw someone suddenly come in, and she couldn't even tell that she was the one who broke into the house. The girl in front of her naturally had silver short hair hanging in her ears, her emerald green pupils were as clean and pure as a spring lake, and she was wearing a red dress that looked like a maid's dress. However, if you observe carefully, you can still see the steel armor hidden beneath her clothes. Sir, this place is still being cleaned and outsiders are not allowed to enter. The silver-haired girl was initially scared and panicked by the newcomers, but as she constantly reminded herself to pay attention to maid etiquette, she quickly calmed down. The sound, like water, echoed through the air in the room with only 2 people. Me. But I have already rented this house today, can I also be considered an outsider? Although the girl in front of him is beautiful, this is not a reason why Bai Qiyun can let him continue to act in his own home. In fact, after a slightly surprised initial encounter, Bai Qiyun thought carefully and understood who the person in front of him was. Maid, cleaning. The rose I found in bed before Lenovo, this girl is likely the one who has been cleaning this house. However, being treated as an outsider by the other party in his own home still made him a little uncomfortable. Hey. Is that so? Sorry, Mr. Gerda didn't notify me, so I thought. The young man's words made the maid, who could have barely remained calm, blush in an instant. She repeatedly apologized to the boy. I'm sorry, I didn't know people were staying here today. Although the girl in front of him was considered to have illegally invaded the house, considering the legitimacy of the other party in the somewhat unreliable old man, Bai Qiyun still decided to pretend that this had never happened. He waved his hand and tried to use a nonchalant tone, it's not that big of a deal. You've been cleaning the room before, right? Hey. I didn't expect the other party to guess their identity so quickly. The maid was a bit nervous and grateful. Since I know my identity, I guess the punishment won't be too severe. If it's too serious, then no one will clean the library at the headquarters of the Knights. She had promised Miss Lisa to help before. If we break the promise, it won't be good. I made a mistake. You can ask me to do anything within my ability as compensation. The maid made a great decision before speaking out about it, and her slender neck, like jade, was dyed red. Seeing this, Bai Qiyun took a deep breath. Hello, miss. Do you know what you mean by saying this to a man? These days, girls dare to say anything. Just as he was daydreaming, he inadvertently used his spare light to sweep behind the maid lady, where a divine eye hung prominently. Oh, there's a divine eye, then it's okay. Anyway, others can't beat you either. After realizing the difference in rank between himself and the girl in front of him, Bai Qiyun felt worried about himself for the other person just now feeling foolish. Ordinary people want to defeat those who have the eye of God, unless the opponent is a beginner who has just obtained the eye of God or a surprise attack. Otherwise, as long as the opponent takes it seriously, it is almost a guaranteed defeat. However, the divine eye of the rock attribute Bai Qiyun squinted his eyes, but soon they returned to their original state. No need, besides, if this matter is really responsible, it's also Mr. Gerda's responsibility. If I punish you here, then I won't be able to demand compensation from him afterwards. Is it like this? Noelle covered her mouth with her hands in armored gloves, and her surprise could be seen through her green eyes. Bai Qiyun tilted his head and made no comment. It seems that starting from the victim's own interests is actually the most convincing way to persuade this maid lady. Speaking of which, what's your name? My name is Bai Qiyun and I'm from Liyue. My name is Noelle and I am a trainee maid of the Knights of the West Wind. Oh, the apprentice maid. Damn it, are people with divine eyes all interns? How powerful is the Shifan Knights? Hey. Bai Qiyun roast about Xiameng in his heart. Looking at Noelle's somewhat shy expression, Bai Qiyun knew that the words he had just said were not enough to completely let go of his guilt. He scratched his face with some confusion. Oh, by the way, I really have something to ask you. What? Anything, as long as I know, I will definitely tell you. To demonstrate his determination, Noelle waved his arms twice in the air. That way, Bai Qiyun's heart trembled with fear. No, you are the owner of the rock attribute Divine Eye. If you accidentally hit my small arms and legs, it would be bad. Well, it's actually about the wings of the wind. Thinking of the pile of regulations that needed to be memorized, he felt a bit headache. However, don't misunderstand. It's not that he has a bad brain and is unwilling to endorse. When he was learning to cook, he looked back and forth with a box full of recipes, and there were plenty of them all afternoon. However, this exam was a bit too tight, and Mon's flight license couldn't be used in Liyue. If he went back, it would be like taking the exam for nothing. He is not an honorary knight, he has various privileges. Wings of the Wind. That's not Miss Amber's. Yes, it's Amber who is in charge. She threw me a regulation and said she would take my written test tomorrow. I'm having a headache right now. Yu reading www.yuukangshu.net. Not to mention it's okay, when it comes to the rabbit girl who has become unconventional, Bai Qiyun feels a bit overwhelmed. After all, they are also trying to help themselves, but this process is a bit, but there's no other way. If the general public wants to receive the Wind Wing, they need to take a written test first. Speaking of the regulations of the Westwind Knights, Noel immediately regained his confidence and his eyes became bright and lively. But I heard that people with the Eye of God and members of the Shifeng Knights can be exempted from the exam. I just wanted to ask if there are any other channels that can do it. Faced with the problem of teenagers, Noel began to search for relevant regulations in his mind. These are all notes she took down while preparing for the exam. Ah, I have it. Do you really have it? Bai Qiyun, who had not expected much initially, was somewhat surprised when he received a positive response. In addition to the owners of the Eye of God and members of the Westwind Knights, there is also a group of people who can claim the Wings of the Wind without examination. That's. Looking at the boy's eager gaze, Noel remembered her time as a tour guide for tourists from other countries. The girl's smile is like a blooming rose, passionate and mysterious. Full members of the Adventurers Association can also claim Wind Wings in Mond without taking the exam. Adventurer. For some reason, Bai Qiyun's voice immediately increased significantly. He immediately adjusted his expression after realizing his loss of composure. Cough cough. However, it seems that the president of the Adventurers Association, Celius, is not in the city recently. You can go to Miss Catherine's office at the association's office to inquire, perhaps it will be helpful.